Good evening. Jai Bhim, Jai Savitri, Jai Phule to everybody. Happy Dalit History Month to all. Thank you so much for having me here. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm glad that we can be together virtually. The theme of today's event is focused on what does it mean to be Ambedkarite today? What does Ambedkarism mean in today's context? I was raised in a Phule Ambedkarite and Marxist household. I was also born and raised in the soil of Satara and Sangli districts of Maharashtra, India. The soil rich with the history of the non-Brahmin movement and Mahatma Phule's Satyashodak movement, and the rich soil of the anti-caste socialist and militant fighters of the Prati Sarkar, the parallel government movement that opposed the British government. A soil rich with the anti-caste, non-Brahmin culture and music that was steeped and with the sounds and smells of the Satyashodak Jalsas and the theater. I was born and raised just an hour outside of Kolhapur, where the great anti-caste King Shahu Maharaj ruled, who introduced one of the earliest reservations of affirmative action policies, implementing 50% of reservations for Dalit and other oppressed castes in the area. I grew up in a village bordering the great Ambedkarite Marxist playwright Anna Bausate's village, whose ideas of merging anti-caste communist cultural work and building movements to annihilate and challenge caste and capitalism were strong foundations for many young people in the movement then. I feel pride in this legacy and in this history, and I also feel the weight of its responsibility. We have been asked today to talk about what does Ambedkarism mean in today's world, and how can its principles shape our future? What does Ambedkarism mean as we speak in the diaspora, as we are situated in the diaspora in the United States? How do we approach social change, building movements here in the United States in challenging times of authoritarianism and fascism taking root, while continuing to be rooted in the principles of Ambedkarism? How do we build a just future as Ambedkarites? First, to me, to be an Ambedkarite means to be fiercely anti-caste, to believe in fighting for the total annihilation of caste, not just in rhetoric, but in action. Dr. Ambedkar believed that to achieve a just and equitable society, the biggest criteria is the complete destruction of the caste system. It's a real question for us today. How do we work towards making this happen? How do we achieve this when the caste system is so entrenched and so intertwined with capitalism, with patriarchy? How do we achieve this when caste is so deeply embedded in people's daily lives and our mindsets? How do we annihilate caste while acknowledging that today's caste system exists? It keeps people apart, it discriminates, it oppresses, it dominates, it perpetuates violence for the most oppressed and at the bottom of the hierarchy. How do we annihilate caste without annihilating capitalism and patriarchy that is now so completely bound up in it? These are important questions for our times, and as Ambedkarites, we have to collectively address them together. Second, to be an Ambedkarite means to be fiercely and unapologetically challenging and naming Brahmanism and Brahmanic supremacy, as it embodies every aspect of our lives. Challenging the Brahmanic historical, cultural interpretation, appropriation, and destruction of our cultures, our histories, our identities. This means challenging, completely rejecting the imposed Brahmanical Hindu identities. It means exposing how this Brahmanical dominance continues to control so much of our culture and our ideas, even in the diaspora, in the ways that our festivals are practiced and narratives are perpetuated about who India is and what our cultures and rituals and festivals are. We can share many examples. The biggest one I'm seeing today is the complete censoring of the ideas and representation of Mahatma Phule's film by the Film Censor Board in India. Being an Ambedkarite also means believing in the strength and the resilience of our histories and the non-Brahmanic and anti-caste peoples and their power that has for thousands of years stood steadfast against Brahmanic dominance and appropriation. One of the reasons that they're censoring Phule is to suppress this, to erase this power. A line that was censored in the Phule film was, "Ye 3,000 saal ki gulami hai." This is 3,000 years of slavery. They want to erase history. Third, to be Ambedkarite is to be unapologetically and fiercely feminist. Baba Sahib asserted that the caste system is rooted in the oppression of women and that it needs the domination to continue to survive as a system. That it was gender oppression and policing of bodies of women and also queer people that is essential to upholding both patriarchy and the caste system, as the two are inextricably linked. Because Baba Sahib contended that Brahmanical patriarchy was especially suppressive, he always championed legal and constitutional reforms to advance women's rights, including the Hindu Code Bill, which sought to grant women equal inheritance and marriage freedom. So to be an Ambedkarite means consistently working to challenge women's oppression, to be rooted in gender justice, to support the leadership and voices of Dalit women and LGBTQI people, their ideas, their work. To be an Ambedkarite is to challenge patriarchal tendencies and actions within ourselves too. Third, to be an Ambedkarite is to be for labor rights. Dr. Ambedkar showed us that the core of the caste system is maintained through the graded division of laborers. And this capitalist system today further entrenches the caste system, maintaining the graded division of laborers. Dr. Ambedkar envisioned a society where equitable society can be achieved not only through the eradication of caste, but also by establishing an economic system that ensured equitable wealth and resource distribution. He recognized that the capitalist system perpetuated caste-based discrimination by limiting access to those resources and opportunities. Baba Sahib actively fought against caste-based discrimination in the workplace, advocating for equal opportunities and treatment for all workers, regardless of their caste or background. Examples in the diaspora are plenty where this is not happening. The biggest one is the Bap's Temple case, where dominant caste capitalists here in the United States have exploited Dalit and Adivasi workers' labor for $1 an hour to build a temple in New Jersey and claiming that there is volunteer labor. This is nothing but a perpetuation of caste supremacy and its labor exploitation. We are seeing this across the country. Whenever there are fights to protect people from caste discrimination, they are being challenged and opposed at every level by the Hindu supremacist networks in the US. When anti-caste coalitions come together in Seattle and won the historic bill for protection against caste discrimination in the city, Hindu supremacist groups were front and center in opposing it. Here in the state of California, when the anti-caste movement won the struggle and got legislation passed through both the houses at the state level, the Hindu supremacists mobilized all their forces and they made use of their history of donating to the Democratic Party to get the governor to veto the bill in the state. But the struggle was not lost. Through the process of countless of people coming together, people learned about the caste struggle in California. And not too long ago, the similar coalitions that were built through these struggles, because many Californians knew about the facade of Hindu supremacists, they were able to come together to oppose the Hindutva networks in challenging the ethnic studies curriculum in Fremont. Anti-caste communities and movements have been fighting the erasure of our histories, not just in India, but Hindutva attempts to do the same here. From the California textbook battle to sanitize Indian history by removing critical references to caste, to the latest struggle on SB 403 bill, to the struggle in Fremont, anti-caste movement has been putting up a battle for anti-caste futures here too. We all know that the Hindu supremacists are at their very core caste supremacists because they believe in maintaining the Brahminical dominance. And this is why their core mandate is here in the United States is to continually fight us whenever and wherever people assert the right to be protected from caste discrimination. Hindu supremacists in this country want to deny people protection from caste discrimination by denying that caste discrimination exists at all. They're mobilizing their own communities so they can maintain their so-called God-given right to discriminate freely at will on the basis of caste. This is why they follow in the ideological footsteps and unite with the most bigoted white supremacist ideologies. The American Hindu supremacist playbook relies on exploiting its supporters, their minority status, so-called Hindus being the minorities, and weaponizing the language of social justice and multiculturalism in the United States. And they mask their supremacist ideals by framing it as reclaiming their Hindu culture and their Hindu identity. They're pushing the soft Hindutva through their education groups, cultural camps, through yoga, religious celebrations to build credibility within many communities here in the United States, and then identify their recruits and they radicalize them towards Hindutva politics. They use the veneer of being a cultural and advocacy organizations to collaborate with and gain endorsement of liberal advocacy groups and democratic politicians and liberal interfaith spaces. At the same time, they shut down criticism by labeling anybody opposes them as and anybody who criticizes them, whether they're educators or elected officials or journalists or activists, as Hindu-phobic. And this exploitation of minority status in liberal spaces happens in tandem with the same actors cozying up to the MAGA far right. Hindu supremacists for many decades began as a group focused on Hindutva project in India, but now they were relatively apathetic before to the US politics, but second generation organizations like the Hindu American Foundation found spaces within these civil rights coalitions, within Democratic Party. And they're wanting to be anointed as the representatives of the Indian community, because to them, Indian equals Hindu. But with time, with the rise of Modi and Trump, Hindu supremacist groups are increasingly incompatible with these partners, with these civil rights coalitions. And at the same time, the MAGA right has offered them easier access and natural affinity. The supremacist ideologies unite. Hindutva groups are increasingly beginning to adopt Trump's and MAGA language. For example, now they're using critical caste theory to articulate what they had been doing all along, whether that is painting themselves as model minorities and then attacking civil rights protections for marginalized groups. Now they have joined the fight against affirmative actions, fight against DEI, fight against legislations against caste discrimination, as we know. They're spreading anti-Muslim bigotry and amplifying major players in the global Islamophobia network. And they're opposing ethnic studies curriculum and academic freedom as we speak. And they do this while inventing false victimhood narratives of so-called Hinduphobia. While playing victims, they punch down on anti-caste movements, to punch down on Sikh communities and Muslim Indian Americans living in this country. Just recently, they passed a Hinduphobia bill in Georgia. Make no mistake that the Hinduphobia bill is a casteist bill. It's about maintaining Hindutva dominance. It's about denying that caste oppression exists. And if this spreads, the first communities that will be a target are Dalit and oppressed caste people and anti-caste workers and Muslims and Sikh Americans. In the next few years, Hindu nationalists will be leveraging their presence in high-profile Hindutva supporters that are in national security positions like Kaj Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, and they'll use that to identify and intensify attacks against political opponents, attacks on nonprofit groups and funders. They will intensify anti-Dalit, anti-caste, and caste discrimination movements. Anti-Muslim, anti-Sikh fear-mongering will be increasing on behalf of them. And they will double down on the anti-woke stances, especially in education spaces. And this is where we must be alert to ensure that they don't tell their sanitized, dramatic version of the Indian history and the caste system. And they will attempt to continue to maintain their foothold in liberal and democratic spaces too. And insisting that Dalits and Sikhs and Muslims and lefties pose a greatest danger to them than the right. In this context, how do we be an Ambedkarite? It means challenging Hindu supremacist politics, Hindutva politics, their bigoted casteism and Islamophobia and their ideologies wherever they exist. We have to fiercely challenge Islamophobia within our communities, outside of our communities. For because when we unite across caste, across faith, across class lines to fight for a better world, it's the only path to achieving liberation for all of us. That is what it means to be an Ambedkarite. To be an Ambedkarite means opposing the appropriation and distortion of Baba Sahib's ideas by the Hindutva ideologues and Hindutva movement wherever it's happening. To be an Ambedkarite is to follow in the long legacy of not only Baba Sahib's work in challenging the Brahmanical Hindutva, but also following in the legacy of Phule and the non-Brahmin movements that existed from Phule's to the Periyas in many places in India and beyond. Based in the diaspora, it is especially important to remember that to be an Ambedkarite is also to be an anti-racist and to be an anti-imperialist too. Despite what they will tell you, Dr. Ambedkar and Phule and others in the long lineage of anti-caste leaders believed that both the struggles of caste annihilation and against colonialism were important, and they fiercely fought against both, and that anti-caste demands had to be an integral part of the struggle for freedom from British. In today's time, we must remember this, that as Ambedkarites, we must also be anti-racist and anti-imperialist. To stand with the immigrants and undocumented. To stand with our Black siblings who continue to face systemic violence and discrimination, and MAGA white supremacists as they're attacking critical race theory, and MAGA people admiring Hindu supremacists attacking what they call critical race theory. They have all the allegiances clear. We must too. It means standing with the most marginalized, being persecuted, the most oppressed in this country, and to work for freedom for all, for liberty, equality, and fraternity. Baba Sahib has said, ours is a battle not for wealth, not for power. Ours is a battle for freedom, for reclamation of human personality. Throughout his life, Dr. Ambedkar worked in pursuit of learning. He also evolved. He also changed. He evolved through reading, through discussing countless ideas, countless texts and theories that came his way. Through the debates and through the discussions, he continued to change and evolve himself, and his theories also evolved with him. If he had lived longer, he would have continued to evolve even more. And so in that tradition, as an Ambedkarite, let's continue to evolve, to learn, to change, and to be changed for the better as we educate, as we agitate, and as we organize towards annihilation of caste and against Brahminical patriarchy.